The champagne sparkled under the golden lights, laughter swirling like music around me. I was basking in the warmth of my perfect anniversary cruise when Lily, my husband's 20-year-old niece, glided past guests and leaned in close. Her perfume was sweet, but her voice cut sharp. "Leave the room, now." My smile froze. I stepped back, heels clicking on polished wood, the party's glow fading into the hum of the ship's engines. Then I heard it. Mark's voice, low and cold, speaking my name, my bank account, and a plan that made my stomach drop into the dark sea below. The air on the top deck was warm with the scent of salt and champagne. Strings of lights stretched above our heads, swaying gently with the ship's motion. Mark stood beside me, one arm draped around my waist, smiling for yet another family photo. Laughter rose and fell like the tide, and every face around me gleamed with affection. At least, that's how it looked. Tonight was meant to be flawless. A decade together, celebrated in front of the people he called family. His mother, Regina, approached with regal poise, holding a small velvet box. "For you, Emma," she said, her voice honeyed yet sharp at the edges. Inside was a sapphire necklace, deep blue and cold under the lights. She fastened it around my neck herself, her fingers brushing my skin. "This family," she whispered, "is forever." The stone rested heavy on my collarbone, its weight oddly suffocating. I caught Lily watching me from across the deck. Her expression didn't match the celebration. She was smiling, yes, but her eyes told a different story, something between pity and warning. She looked away quickly when Mark clinked his glass, launching into a toast about love and loyalty. My chest tightened. As the evening wore on, I tried to shake the unease. Music played, glasses refilled, people danced. Mark kept a hand on my lower back, guiding me from conversation to conversation. I wore my best smile, the kind that photographs well. But then, through the blur of faces, Lily appeared at my side. She leaned in, her perfume sweet and disarming, her voice just for me. "Leave the room now." I blinked at her, caught off guard. She didn't wait for me to answer. Her smile widened for the crowd as if she'd said something charming. My pulse spiked. I slipped out, my heels clicking against the polished wood, the party's warmth fading behind me. The corridor outside was dim, lit only by small sconces, casting amber pools of light. I slowed my steps when I heard voices ahead. Mark's, low and deliberate. Regina's, crisp and controlled. "She's too comfortable. We've let her think she's part of this family," Regina said. "That's the point," Mark replied. "Once she's off the board, no one will question why the fun comes back to us." "You'll get the signatures?" "I already have most of what I need. The account's in her name. The transfers look clean enough she won't even see it coming." The air thickened around me. My fingers curled into fists. I took a step back, afraid the sound of my breath might give me away. A shadow moved, and suddenly Lily was in the hallway with me, her hand lightly touching my arm. "Come with me," she murmured, leading me down a side passage to a narrow stairwell. We descended quickly, the muffled bass of the party above us fading. She stopped in a small service room and shut the door. From her purse, she pulled out a slim recorder and pressed play. Mark's voice filled the space, clearer than I'd just heard it in the corridor. This time, there was more. "The offshore account's already set up, her passport number's on the paperwork. When they find the money, she's the one they'll come for. By then, we're clear." I felt the floor sway beneath me, not from the ship, but from the realization pressing down on my chest. "This is real?" I whispered. Lily's jaw tightened. "It's worse. That account is in the Caymans. They've been using it for transfers linked to, let's just say, things that would put you away for decades. If the wrong people find it, you're finished." My mind raced. Every smile tonight, every toast, every affectionate gesture, it was all theater. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Her gaze flicked toward the door, then back to me. "Because I was supposed to make sure you stayed in the dark. I can't do that anymore." I shook my head. You realize what this means? I'm already a target. She nodded grimly. And you're not just on their radar. You're on someone else's. This... She handed me a folded sheet of paper. Came through one of my contacts. It's an internal watch list from an international task force. Your name is on it. I unfolded the paper. My eyes locked on the bold letters. Emma Lawson, person of interest. Beneath it, a line about suspected involvement in financial crimes under investigation. My heart pounded in my ears. Somewhere above us, the music swelled again, the laughter spilling into the night. But down here, in the stale air of the service room, my world had shifted. Every step I'd taken onto that deck tonight had been a step into a trap. Lily looked at me with urgency. We don't have much time. If they move before we do, you won't get the chance to tell your side of the story. The ship creaked as it cut through the waves, and I felt the necklace against my skin, its sapphire stone cold as ice. For the first time, I realized it wasn't a gift. It was a shackle. By morning, the mood on the ship had shifted in a way only I seemed to notice. Conversations hushed when I walked by. Regina offered me tea at breakfast, but her smile was so polished it gleamed like glass. Mark sat beside me, his hand covering mine as he asked about my sleep, his tone dripping with concern. "You were talking in your sleep again," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I think the stress is getting to you." Whispers traveled faster than the sea breeze. I caught snippets. She's been forgetful, erratic. Mark says she's under a lot of pressure. By lunch, even crew members looked at me differently, their eyes softened in the way people reserve for the unstable. I understood the tactic, erode my credibility until any accusation I made sounded like paranoia. So I leaned into it. I let my hands tremble when I held my glass. I stared too long at nothing, furrowing my brow as though lost in thought. Regina's approving glances told me the performance was working. Lily stayed away during the day, but that night she slipped into my cabin. Her hoodie was pulled low, the ship's hum filling the silence between us. "I found something," she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. I plugged it into my laptop. The video that opened made my stomach clench. It was me, sitting at a desk signing a thick stack of documents. My voice, my face, my signature, all authentic to anyone watching. But the details screamed fake. The pen was the wrong make, the watch on my wrist one I'd never owned. "They'll say you authorized every transaction," Lily whispered. "It's a deep fake, and it's good. Too good for you to disprove without an expert." The thought of trying to convince anyone this wasn't real was laughable. The footage was crisp, my movements natural. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Not long," she said. "They've already started pushing it to certain people." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was my attorney, Miles. His voice was clipped, urgent. "Emma, I just received a summons from the International Financial Crimes Task Force. They want you in for questioning the moment we dock. What the hell is going on?" The line went dead before I could answer. The next day, I noticed something odd about my messages. Some never reached their recipients. Others came back delayed. That's when I saw the tiny network name in the corner of my screen, Regina Net. I dug into the settings, my pulse pounding. Every single message, email, text, encrypted chat was being routed through a local server. That night, as I stood alone near the aft deck, a man in oil-stained overalls approached. His face was weathered, his voice low. "You don't know me, but I know they've got you caged. You're not the first." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a matte black receiver with a flickering green light. "This breaks their chokehold. Plug it in and you can see everything they're hiding. But..." His eyes locked on mine. "Once you use it, you're as guilty as they are. Unauthorized network intrusion. They'll have reason to lock you away." I weighed the device in my hand. The moral line was thin and fraying. Using it meant crossing into their world, a world where laws were tools, not boundaries. But doing nothing meant walking into an interrogation with no defense. In my cabin, I connected the device. Code spilled across my screen like a secret language. I navigated through encrypted folders, their labels innocuous. Event photos. Supply logs. Inside, they were anything but. Transaction histories, hidden offshore accounts, scanned passports. And then I found it. A video file, time-stamped just days ago. My breath caught as it played. Mark sat in a private room speaking into a phone, but it wasn't his usual voice, it was mine. He was mimicking my cadence perfectly, reading out account numbers, instructing a transfer of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The camera angle shifted just enough for his smirk to catch the light. He ended the call, closed a ledger, and glanced at the sapphire necklace resting on the table in front of him. He touched it almost tenderly, then pushed it aside like an object of no consequence. The device in my hand grew heavier, the green light pulsing in the dark cabin. The evidence was undeniable. But so was the truth. It wasn't just a cage anymore. It was a trap, and the door had already swung shut. By the third night, the pieces began to rearrange themselves into a picture I hadn't wanted to see. Regina's sharp commands and Mark's smug compliance suddenly felt scripted. Their authority wasn't real. It was borrowed. The true weight, I realized, came from the quiet figure who had been absent from most of the cruise's social moments. Charles Lawson, Mark's father. Charles had always been courteous, measured, the sort of man who made you feel he was listening even when he wasn't. I used to think his absence from family disputes meant he stayed above the pettiness. Now I knew better. The offshore accounts, the deepfake video, the manipulated network, they bore the marks of someone with long reach and steady patience. Regina was his mouthpiece, Mark his puppet. That understanding cracked something inside me. All those years of family dinners, of carefully arranged coincidences that made me feel lucky to be part of them, they weren't chance. They were layers of control, each one designed to make me dependent, grateful, blind. Lily found me on the observation deck, the wind snatching strands of her hair. "It's worse than I thought," she said, handing me a small envelope. Inside was a printed itinerary for the cruise. My heart stopped at the notation next to our arrival date. Dock, Nassau, the Bahamas. Fast-track extradition agreements with half the financial crime units in the world. The perfect place to hand me over once the deepfake surfaced. "They'll drop the video the moment we dock," Lily said. "You'll be processed before you can even make a call." I tried to steady my breathing, but my phone vibrated in my hand. No caller ID. When I answered, there was only silence. Then the soft slide of paper across a desk. A moment later, my screen lit with a new message. It was a photo. Me sitting at a table, pen in hand, signing what looked like a confession. My signature at the bottom, my initials on each page. I had never seen the document in my life. A chill ran down my spine. Whoever sent it wanted me to know they were always one step ahead. That night, Mark invited me to help with a shipment check in one of the lower decks. I should have refused, but I needed to see where the threads led. The storage bay was cold, the air metallic with the scent of sealed crates. I stepped inside, the door swinging shut behind me. A lock clicked. The silence was absolute. I pounded on the metal, my shout swallowed by the belly of the ship. Minutes or hours passed. I sat on a crate, forcing myself to think. If Charles wanted me contained, there had to be a reason. Footsteps, a key in the lock. The door opened, revealing Lily. She slipped inside, shutting it quickly behind her. "You're not going to like this," she said, her voice low. "I can get you out, but you have to agree to something first." I eyed her warily. "What kind of something?" She leaned against a crate, arms folded. "I've been working for Charles since before you married, Mark. My job was to keep tabs on you, make sure you never became a threat. But I've seen too much. I want out. I want him gone." My stomach nodded. "And you expect me to trust you?" "No," she said plainly, "but you need what I have." She reached into a duffel bag and pulled out a black hard-shell case. The latches snapped open to reveal neatly stacked folders, hard drives, and passports. This is everything. Transactions, shell companies, offshore account numbers. The real evidence. Not just the stuff they planted on you. I stared at it, my mind racing through the implications. With this, I could dismantle Charles's network, but possessing it also made me the most dangerous person on the ship. To him, to Mark, and maybe even to Lily. Why give this to me? I asked. Because I can't take him down alone, and because if you go down, so do I. We're both in his web now. The ship groaned as a wave struck the hull, the sound echoing through the metal walls. I closed the case with a decisive snap. Fine, I said. We do this together. Her eyes held mine, a flicker of something, fear, maybe hope, passing through them. Then we need to move before he realizes it's missing. As we slipped out of the bay, the weight of the case in my hand felt heavier than any shackle. For the first time since the cruise began, I wasn't just running from the trap. I was carrying the means to break it. The gala was set to be the crowning jewel of the cruise, a black tie evening under chandeliers, streamed live to friends, investors, and political allies back on shore. Exactly the kind of stage Charles liked to control. Exactly the kind I intended to burn. In the hours before the event, Lily and I moved like shadows through the crew corridors, slipping past kitchens and service stations. She carried the black case. I carried the small transmitter we'd taken from the ship's media console. One wrong move and we'd be in the brig, but there was no other way. In the main hall, cameras panned slowly over guests, draped in silk and diamonds. A pianist played something soft and elegant. I stood near the technical booth, pretending to admire the decor while Lily crouched behind a rack of equipment. When the clock on the far wall ticked to 9, she gave me the smallest nod. The screens above the stage flickered. The piano stumbled to a halt. At first, the crowd thought it was a technical glitch, until the audio kicked in. Mark's voice, crisp and unmistakable. The offshore account's already set up. When they find the money, Emma takes the fall. Regina appeared next, signing documents beside Mark. Then Charles, shaking hands with a suited stranger in a dim office. But the real gasp came when the camera angle shifted again, to reveal a prominent government minister, one whose face was instantly recognizable, passing an envelope thick with cash across the table. The room went cold. Glasses stopped midair. Conversations cut short. Then the murmurs began, sharp and rising. Some guests started filming the screens. Others moved toward the exits. The captain's voice boomed over the intercom, ordering everyone to remain in place by instruction of maritime security. In the chaos, I scanned the room for Charles. He wasn't at his table. Lily's eyes widened, and she pointed toward the upper deck. Through the crowd, I caught a glimpse of him slipping away, a black leather case in his hand. I didn't wait. I shoved through the stunned guests, ignoring the shouts behind me. The ship swayed hard. Wind was picking up, and somewhere above, thunder rolled across the sky. By the time I reached the open deck, rain was slashing sideways. Charles was ahead, moving with surprising speed for his age. He glanced back once, his expression unreadable, before disappearing around a corner. I followed, my shoes slipping on the wet boards, until I found him at the aft rail. He set the case on a bench, his body shielding it from view. "Give it to me," I shouted over the wind. He smiled faintly. "You think you can win this, Emma? This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us." Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face in stark relief. I lunged and we grappled, the rain turning the deck into a slick battlefield. The case tumbled open in the struggle. Inside was a single USB drive, gleaming silver against the black lining. Even in the storm, I recognized its weight, not in grams, but in what it contained. Enough data to connect Charles to an international web of laundering, fraud, and political corruption. Footsteps pounded behind me. Lily burst into view, breathless, a crewman's baton in her hand. She swung it toward Charles, knocking him back against the rail, but in the instant of her strike, he grabbed her arm and twisted hard. She cried out, stumbling to her knees. I yanked her away, shoving her behind me, and leveled my gaze at Charles. The wail of approaching sirens carried over the wind, Coast Guard vessels closing in. 2 officers appeared from the stairwell, guns raised. Charles froze, his eyes darting to the open case. One of the officers stepped forward, cuffing him before dragging him toward the interior. The other secured the case. The victory should have felt like air after drowning. But Lily was crumpled against the bench, her face pale, blood seeping between her fingers where she clutched her side. "You need a medic," I said, kneeling beside her. Her grip on my wrist was weak but insistent. "They'll take you, if you stay." Rain pelted my face, cold and blinding. The officers were already moving Charles below deck. A lifeboat hung just yards away, swaying with the ship's motion, a path to safety. Behind me, Lily's breath hitched in pain. In that moment, the choice was no longer about evidence or revenge. It was about who I was willing to leave behind in the storm. The headlines came first. Cruise night scandal, daughter-in-law exposes international money laundering ring. Emma Lawson, hero or mastermind? By the time we docked, I couldn't walk 10 feet without a camera in my face. News anchors framed me in sharp suits and sympathetic smiles, calling me the woman who brought down a political minister and a criminal patriarch in one night. But the words alleged and suspected clung to every sentence. Mark, naturally, had vanished from the public eye. Regina claimed ignorance to everything, her statements oozing with the sweet poison of faux innocence. Charles remained in custody, but his lawyers were circling like sharks. Lily was in the hospital, pale and still, her chest rising under a tangle of tubes. The doctors called her condition stable but offered no timeline. I sat by her bed in the mornings, speaking into the silence, hoping my voice might anchor her somewhere she could hear. By afternoon, I was in meeting rooms with my attorney, Miles, facing questions from investigators who smiled politely while dissecting my every move. "You had access to the evidence before it aired," one of them said. "I didn't fabricate it," I replied evenly. "I exposed it." "Convenient," the other murmured, jotting notes. The victory was poisoned. The more they lauded me in headlines, the more they whispered that I'd orchestrated it all, not to reveal the truth, but to seize what Charles and Mark had tried to take from me. One evening, after leaving the hospital, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You've cut off one head. The body is still alive." I replied without thinking. "Who is this? The one they serve?" The message was followed by an address and a time. No name, no threats, just an invitation. I should have told Miles. Instead, I found myself in a private dining room of an upscale restaurant 2 nights later, the city glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. A man in his 50s rose from the table as I entered, his face instantly familiar. Julian Mercer, my former financial advisor, the one who'd coached me on investments before I ever met Mark. Back then, he'd been charming, brilliant, endlessly resourceful. Now his eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen the inside of too many back rooms. "Emma," he said warmly, as though greeting an old friend, "you've grown into the role I always thought you could handle." I sat, my pulse steady, only because I forced it to be. "You're the one pulling the strings." He chuckled. "Strings? That's such a small word. Let's call it a network, and you've proven you can play at this level." "Charles was yours," I said. "Of course," he replied. "Everyone is to some degree, but you," he leaned in, "you're free now. No husband, no obligations. You could be more than just a survivor. You could run with us." "Us," I repeated. He smiled, the kind that never reached his eyes. "The web. We move money, influence, entire governments if we wish. In return, we protect our own. You've seen what happens to those outside it." I kept my tone neutral. "And what's in it for you?" An ally who knows how to win without flinching, he said. We'd give you absolute security. No more threats, no more traps. You'd be untouchable. It would have been tempting if I hadn't already seen how he regarded people as assets to be acquired or discarded. He wasn't offering safety. He was offering a gilded cage. I need to think about it, I told him. Of course, he said smoothly, reaching into his jacket. He slid a small brass key across the table. A gesture of trust. There's a safety deposit box in Zurich. Inside is something you'll want to see. I turned the key in my hand. What's in it? Everything, he said simply. Names, accounts, leverage, enough to own the whole web or destroy it. His gaze locked on mine. If you want in, you'll know what to do. If you don't, well, make sure you have somewhere very far to run. He rose, buttoned his jacket, and left without a backward glance. The key felt heavier than metal in my palm. Back at my apartment, I set it on the table and stared at it long into the night. I could see two futures in its shape, one where I took his offer and lived behind impenetrable walls, another where I used it to tear his empire apart. Either way, once I turned that key, there would be no going back. Zurich was cold the day I turned the key. The safety deposit room smelled faintly of paper and steel, the kind of place where history and ruin shared the same box. Inside, Julian's gesture of trust was exactly as promised. Names, account ledgers, offshore structures, encrypted drives, enough to burn his entire network to the ground or crown me its new ruler. For 2 days, I didn't sleep. I studied every file, mapping the arteries of power and money that wound through governments, corporations, even humanitarian fronts. Every name was a weapon, every account a loaded chamber. And at the center of it all was Julian's signature, never direct, always masked by layers of intermediaries. I thought of Lily lying in that hospital bed, tubes snaking into her arms, of Charles behind bars but already maneuvering for an exit, of the investigators who eyed me like I might be the very thing I exposed. I booked a meeting with the International Financial Crimes Task Force. The conference room they gave me was small, windowless, the kind meant for confidential confessions. I slid the files across the table to the lead officer. "Everything you need to dismantle the web," I said. She leafed through the top folder, her eyes narrowing. "Do you know what this means, Emma? With this, you could have controlled—" "I'm not interested in controlling anything," I cut in. "I want it gone." She hesitated. "You realize you're forfeiting billions in potential assets?" "Not forfeiting," I said. "Freeing myself." Her expression softened just slightly. "And what do you want in return?" "Protection for Lily Lawson, full immunity for her regardless of what she's been tied to. And I want Julian Mercer off the streets." The deal took hours to hammer out, but by nightfall, my terms were set. The files were gone from my possession, the drives copied into the hands of people who could end the network rather than inherit it. That night, in the small mirror above my hotel sink, I studied my reflection. My hair was damp from the rain, my eyes sharper than I remembered. The woman staring back at me was no longer the smiling wife in sapphire. She was something harder, forged in storms and betrayal. And she was mine. Months later, Lily woke. Her recovery was slow, but she never once asked why I looked so different. She could see it. The day she was discharged, I took her to an office overlooking the harbor. The sign on the door read, "The Horizon Trust." Inside, sunlight pooled over rows of desks. Our staff, lawyers, advocates, investigators, worked quietly. Each case file a lifeline for a woman, somewhere trying to escape the kind of invisible chains I'd worn for years. We started with small victories, securing emergency funds, freezing abusive partners' accounts, finding safe housing. Then the trust grew. Donations poured in, some anonymous, some from people who had once been too afraid to act. Within a year, we had offices in 6 countries. Lily became my right hand, fierce, meticulous, unflinching in courtrooms. She still carried scars from that night on the ship, but she never let them slow her. Sometimes we worked late into the evening, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls, and I'd catch her looking at me like she was still trying to decide whether I'd saved her or ruined her life. One afternoon, a woman from Argentina hugged me so hard I nearly lost my breath. "You saved my children," she said in accented English. "You gave us a chance." Moments like that reminded me why I'd chosen to burn the web rather than wear it. 2 years in, the Horizon Trust launched its global summit. Delegates from 20 countries filled the conference hall, sharing strategies to combat financial abuse and systemic exploitation. As I stood at the podium, cameras flashing, I thought of the path here, of the crews, the whispers, the storms, and of how close I'd come to becoming exactly what I'd destroyed. After the applause faded, I stepped outside for air. The night was warm, the city alive with neon and traffic. I leaned on the railing, letting the hum of it all settle in my bones. That's when I felt someone beside me. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with eyes that held a shadow I recognized instantly. She smiled politely to the crowd behind us, then leaned in, her voice barely above the noise. "Leave the room, now." For a heartbeat, the world stilled. The words were the same Lily had once breathed into my ear, the same that had pulled me out of the illusion and into the fight of my life. I turned to face her fully. "Tell me everything," I said. Somewhere deep inside, I knew my story wasn't ending. It was beginning again.